So I can see a future where actually things move at different speeds. Mundane tasks, getting your next pair of runners that look exactly like your last pair of runners, refilling your fridge when things have gone out of date. I can see those things happening quite quickly. But for things that we enjoy, Scott, we typically choose to be part of those flows. I think they could stay at assisted for some time. And I think that could take a number of years, not because the technology wouldn't allow us to complete it, but it's because people are choosing to remain part of that flow because they enjoy it.
Welcome to the Retailgentic podcast, where we explore the intersection of retail, e-commerce, and AI agents, which we call Retailgentic. Our mission is simple. We are shining a bright light on the new agentic AI shopping megatrend, which will disrupt the trillion-dollar digital retail market. The stakes are high. Google, OpenAI, Microsoft, Perplexity, Amazon, Apple, Meta, and Anthropic are all fighting to be the consumer AI shopping agent winner. There are going to be some tough decisions for online brands and retailers to make. What happens to checkout? How should payments work? Should you continue to invest in retail media networks? What does the world look like when over half of your traffic is not from humans, but from AI agents? These existential questions are the tip of the iceberg. On this podcast, we're talking to industry experts, analysts, and influencers to get answers to these questions, identify trends, and best practices. This is Retailgentic, your podcast partner in navigating our AI shopping agent future. And now here's your host, Scott Wingo.
Welcome to the Retailgentic podcast. In this episode, I'm excited to welcome Mastercard's Chief Innovation Officer, Ken Moore. In my conversation with Ken, we dig into how one of the world's leading payment companies is approaching innovation at a global scale and what they're doing in agentic commerce. We start with Ken's background and how innovation works inside of Mastercard, including the role of the Foundry Group. And of course, it wouldn't be the Retailgentic podcast if we didn't spend the bulk of our time talking about our favorite topic, agentic commerce. Mastercard launched its first agentic commerce in April of 2025, if you can believe that, which is very, very early in the overall timeline, which naturally led me to ask the question, how did they see this coming so soon, and how were they able to react so fast? From there, Ken and I explore Mastercard's agentic payments program, including initiatives like AgentPay and the Agentic Toolkit. One area I find really interesting that is we're going to find a lot more things going on around is how Mastercard's enabling agents to deliver more personalized experiences while maintaining strong standards around security, governance, and consumer consent. That capability for personalization is powered by what Mastercard calls Insight Tokens. It's a secure and governed way for agents to access and apply permissioned insights from Mastercard. As agentic commerce matures, Insight Tokens will enable consumers to receive, always with their consent, more personalized and useful experiences and information. We also touch on just how quickly the space is evolving. In fact, since this conversation was recorded, Mastercard's announced that it has joined forces with Google on the UCP Universal Commerce Protocol. It's bringing AgentPay to Copilot checkout, and it's expanded its award-winning startup engagement program, StartPath, to further advance agentic commerce and services. As Ken hinted, there's even more coming soon, so stay tuned for what's coming out of Mastercard. Finally, we wrap up by tackling the alphabet soup of agentic payment protocols. Are we done creating new ones, or are more on the way? Ken closes out this episode by sharing his view of where agentic commerce is heading by 2030. Enjoy my conversation with Ken Moore, Mastercard's Chief Innovation Officer, and happy agentic commercing, everybody. Ken Moore, Mastercard Chief Innovation Officer. Welcome to the Retailgentic podcast.
Scott, thank you so much for having me, and Happy New Year to you and to all of your viewers and listeners.
Happy New Year to you. Yeah, you're the we will have an episode that drops in the new year, but this is the first one we're recording in the new year. So it's exciting, and we're starting off with a bang. So you have a high, you need to set the bar really high for 2026 for us. No pressure. So you and I have had a chance to chat, and I've enjoyed getting to know you. Let's share with the audience a little bit about your background. And I always think it's interesting one of the things I love about agentic commerce is we have all these older businesses that have been around for a very long time that have suddenly become very nimble and are acting very quickly. And I find that interesting because, The Innovator's Dilemma is one of my favorite books, and companies are increasingly good at like not getting trapped in the Innovator's Dilemma. So that's kind of a setup to help you tell your background.
My own background, so I'm originally a technologist. So I come from a background of kind of combined background really of kind of business technology and then interestingly organizational psychology. My career started off in financial services, kind of building banking software, banking applications for many of the world's leading banks. But that took me out and away from Ireland. As you can probably tell from my accent, I'm proudly Irish, but that really got me on the road. So I lived throughout Africa, Asia, Latin America, working with some of the largest banks out there to build the products and services in both the consumer space and on the business banking side that would help them succeed and help their customers succeed. From there, I launched a couple of startups. I probably had more hair then, and I lost it on a few of those startups, like so many's out there. So there's some scars on the back, certainly, from that one. Interestingly, and probably more of a beer conversation than a podcast conversation, I had a go at launching a digital bank. Early in 2000s. Great idea, just a little bit too early. Then I've been in the consulting world, so I listened with interest to your conversation with Casey from Deloitte, their chief futurist recently. So I had a kind of somewhat similar role within Accenture. I've also worked in Citigroup extensively across the corporate bank. And then I joined Mastercard 8 years ago to head up what Mastercard calls Foundry, but it's its innovation arm. So it's the team within Mastercard that really tries to discern or anticipate where the world of commerce is going, and then to build the products and services that make our customers successful against that world as it arrives. So it's not quite the dreamer role, although it's very, very important that I have a lens on the future shaped by technology and changes in consumer behavior. But that lens also has to engender action. So I have to build the products and services as well. So sometimes, Scott, I use the term a practical innovator, right? Where I might know where or have a belief that I understand where the world might be going over the next 5 or 6 years, but I have to kind of build the products and services that will be relevant today and every step along that journey.
Cool. It's this Foundry thing concept's really interesting of how bigger companies do innovation. So it sounds like you not only do you ideate them, but you build them. Do you then like incubate them and then get them into the org, or do they is there like a defined period that they kind of leave the nest and join the mothership, or how do you guys think about that? Are they forever in your Foundry mode kind of thing?
No, they're not forever in Foundry. You categorized it quite well, actually. So we obviously experiment on a lot of emerging technologies. We're always kind of playing with a purpose, though. So when we look at a particular technology, whether it's quantum or whether it was some of the mixed reality technologies, AI is kind of in a different bucket here. But we really assess, are they fit for purpose? Do they do what they say they can do on the tin? And when I say play with a purpose, I mean, how will they be relevant to both Mastercard's business, but also to the business of our clients? So that's a kind of a lens we take that's kind of pure play R&D. But beyond that, then, we actually describe ourselves as a technology company operating more broadly in commerce. And I know we'll come a little bit to Mastercard's background and our legacy, because we are proud of the fact that we were born as a cards company, but our current kind of business really reflects a much broader product set. So we've had to be highly ambitious and highly innovative, and indeed are very widely recognized as such, to kind of move from what we were into what we are today. So a big part of my world is therefore to build products and services. So I do everything to take an idea from the back of somebody's mind, to work with our partners, with our customers, to make it real. So to turn it into a production grade product or service. And then as that product or service, so as the risk comes away, because many things can and should fail in my world as well, Scott. But as the risk comes away, then we transition it from Mastercard Foundry into the program teams, or that's another word for product groups, that then scale it globally. So that's the kind of symbiotic way we work in the company. We kind of build the net new. If it fails, it fails on us. We're designed to tolerate that. But when it succeeds, it graduates and moves into the product groups, and then they scale it globally, they enhance it, and it becomes an ongoing kind of P&L for them. And that's been a fantastic formula and recipe for us for success, and will prove to be a very valuable asset, I think, for us as the world moves faster and faster. And I think that's a kind of a setup I might give to this session as well, Scott, is that you can look back over the last year, the last 18 months, and you can go, oh my God, in the context of agentic commerce, or even before that, in the context of other technologies, how much change has happened in the past year. But actually, when you look forward, particularly out to 2040, and I know that seems quite far away, but we would expect to see about 4 times as much change in a year in 2040 than we did in last year. And that's really, really important, therefore, that we have an organization that can constantly respond in a nimble and agile way to that future. Because if you take that 4 times change by 2040, by 2030, it means we're going to see 1.5 times the level of change in a year that we currently do today. And we already know that many businesses, many companies, many CEOs, and many leadership teams are already struggling with the pace of change. And that's why that symbiotic relationship between the Mastercard Foundry organization and the product groups, and that appetite for a bit of risk taking and a tolerance of failure works against a world that's just moving faster and faster and faster.
Yeah, so you get the best of both worlds. You get to do startups, but you're in you have all the reach, and if you need to talk to a customer, you have this portfolio of customers you can talk to, and partners, and then you've got the whole, and then as these ideas scale, you've got the distribution and the assets of the bigger company. It's a nice setup you found yourself in, Ken. I'm jealous.
my mother would definitely say I've landed on my feet on this one. You categorized it really well. We kind of operate as the trusted partner in the middle of the global commerce ecosystem. So we have a very, very large network of over 125 million kind of merchants operating in over 200 countries, and we're at the nexus of that. And our really, I suppose, part of the relationship value that we give to those customers, regardless of whether they're a bank or a merchant or a government or a regulator, is, you're not just buying a product or service or working with us on a product or service today. You're also buying a relationship that's really kind of investing into making sure that the future arrives in a safe and secure way, and where you, as our partner, will be well positioned against that future when it arrives.
Got it. So all this is just set up for kind of the kickoff of the discussion. So we talk about agentic commerce here. You've watched the pod. And one of the things that I thought was really impressive, I want to kind of dig away at, is when I first really started getting into this, you guys were there, and I think it was like around that April timeframe. And I kind of think back to that wow, you guys are pretty early announcing a bunch of stuff on agentic, especially in the hindsight we have now. But then I imagine that didn't start in 25. So somewhere in 24, you guys got some signal that this was going to be a thing way before a lot of us did. Maybe to the extent you can share, what was some of the thinking there, where in your position with the Foundry and the pieces you run, what led to that?
You've categorized it really well. I mean, again, some of it comes back to this is a very deliberate thing from us. We're always investing into understanding where we think the world might be going. So if you go back to 24, which is kind of where your question kind of started, and then you kind of moved to 25. So I'll cover both. But even back in 24, we were really looking at the potential of agentic commerce. And we were really assessing it against the convergence of 3 kind of key forces. The first one is kind of advances in AI models. So we had seen generative AI models, the kind of reasoning technologies and reasoning capabilities behind them become more and more advanced. So that was really enabling systems and conversations to become smarter, where the AI could break down complex tasks into smaller steps. And then it had the ability to kind of fix any mistakes that it made along the way. And that was really a step change from what we had seen in kind of previous models. Coupled with that, we also saw advances in computing power. And I'm not really just talking about quantum there, because even though we run quantum in Mastercard in parts of our business today, it's still not really main stage. But we have seen very significant advances in high performance compute. We've seen new chipsets being introduced, not just from NVIDIA, but from everybody else as well, which have given us really the computational capacity to be able to kind of reason and make decisions and run some of these complicated models at both a lower cost and at a faster timeline than with reduced latency than we would have ever seen before. And we had seen also the adoption of kind of maybe some of the enabling or foundational technologies that allow you to move into not just a digital world, but into an agentic world. So specifically, we had seen things like tokens, which kind of mask data, whether that's your card number or it's another form of data. We had seen passkeys, so biometrics and the ability to have a digital identity, but yet a seamless experience. And we had seen things like open banking and kind of consent-based frameworks that consumers are comfortable with. We'd seen all of those kind of foundational ingredients not just start, but actually really show kind of adoption and show scale. And together with that, and Scott, I'm sure you were an early adopter yourself. I certainly was, but we saw humans becoming much more comfortable with the Gen AI assistants that they were using themselves. They weren't necessarily executing transactions, but they were certainly answering questions, and they were becoming more and more a part of our day-to-day lives. And all of that was 24. So when you look at that and you put those together, those forces, the advances in AI, the improvements in computational power, the foundational capabilities like tokens and passkeys and consent models, and it's not a surprise that you start to see humans get a little bit more comfortable with using the models. And as those happen, it then allows you, it's a kind of a signal, even though we knew agentic commerce could happen before we ever got to 24, those were really leading signals that we're kind of on the cusp of something here. So the first part of your question then was about 25. So in 25, those signals were even clearer. So, and the agentic movement or the agentic commerce ecosystem isn't something that's just driven by Mastercard. It's driven by many, many companies, many times operating together or in partnership to kind of help this commerce ecosystem arrive safely and securely. So in 25, we were really, really actively engaged across the ecosystem, working with other partners that, like ourselves, had this lens on this future and this belief that it was going to arrive, but that we collectively wanted it to arrive in the right way. So what we started to see and wanted to do was put in place the building blocks for agentic commerce specifically. And that's really what you saw in 25 for us.
Let's roll right into that. Let's talk about, maybe give us like a little bit of a portfolio of all the things you guys are doing in the world of agentic.
Yeah, it was a hell of a year, actually. In fairness, 25. I don't think many of us could have predicted just how quickly the technology would come on. We were more right than I think we knew ourselves, Scott. And it was very obvious to us very early on that this was different to metaverse. It was different to crypto and blockchain that have a gestation period that looks a little bit different here. Agentic commerce was coming on us kind of fast and furious, and that really reflected throughout the course of the year. So if you go back to April, so April was where we launched AgentPay. So AgentPay was our new infrastructure to support kind of agent-led payments. But importantly, we wanted it to build on the foundations of things that our clients already had in place. So things like our tokenization engines, our tokens more broadly, and passkeys, those kind of biometric-driven forms of identity that we now kind of use in our day-to-day lives. So back in April, we brought those capabilities together and then built on top of them to launch what we called Mastercard AgentPay. And that introduced a couple of really unique capabilities. So in the first instance, it introduced Know Your Agent. Think of that as the agentic equivalent of Know Your Customer or Know Your Business, right? It's a way of registering agents to ensure that only good agents and therefore not malicious bots can actually act on consumers' behalf. Because whilst we were all excited about agentic commerce, we'd all seen, so many times in the past, bad things happen to good intentions. And therefore, we knew that trust was going to be central to the agentic ecosystem. And it was really important in kind of setting out our foundations over the course of 25, and you'll see this come up a couple of times, that a lot of the initial forays were around putting in place the kind of the foundational pillars that will enable trust in the agentic ecosystem. So AgentPay with Know Your Agent kind of was first there. Also in AgentPay, we rolled out what we call order intent, right? So it was really important to kind of understand and provide additional data to merchants to kind of help them fulfill an agentic order. So if I just said to you, buy me a pair of runners, it's very likely you'd get it wrong. But if I say to you, buy me an Adidas shoe in size 9 for under $80 and deliver it in 2 days or less, it's very likely that you're going to get it right. So it became necessary for us to actually provide additional data into these workflows beyond what we would have done on a traditional payment transaction. Consumer consent is really, really important here. We need to make sure that something bad hasn't happened and that any agent that's acting is acting with the consent of a consumer. So you and I have asked it to buy those pair of runners for us. So there we use Passkeys, we use biometrics, frictionless ways that yet deliver really, really strong security and confidence to the consumer that they're still in control of some of these transactions. And then obviously we tokenized the data, the payment credentials themselves, as we would have done in many other payment flows over the course of the previous years. So we got that out. That was kind of April last year. At the time, we decided to launch it first in the US. I think it was Citi and US Bank were our initial customers, so we're going to provide early access to them, and then to all Mastercard cardholders in the US by the end of last year. And then as we take that particular capability and we cast it into 26, we'll make broader access to that across the rest of the world available. What's really interesting on that one, Scott, is in September 25, we actually did our first agentic transaction. It was done with a partner of ours called PayOS. So that was a really, really good, but still somewhat early sign for us. In September then, we kind of built on top of that and we launched a broader suite of tools and services to accelerate agentic readiness. And we did this in response, Scott, to what we were hearing from our customers, that vast network of merchants and banks that we kind of support out there, many of whom were kind of struggling. They were going, this is a lot to take on. We don't necessarily have all of the technical resources in-house to be able to respond at the pace that we feel we need to respond to. So we put a couple of things out there, Scott. We put an Agentic Toolkit out there. So that's built on top of Mastercard developers. It makes it easy for any agentic assistants or even agentic tools to access Mastercard APIs and the documentation around our APIs. And that uses standards like you mentioned, Model Context Protocol and agent-to-agent protocol in our kind of pre-call. So we incorporated standards there to make sure that it was easy for our customers to access our APIs. We also deployed what we called Insight Tokens, so Mastercard Insight Tokens. And these are tokens that enable agents to access Mastercard data and to get insights from it. Now, we do that in a way where the consumer consent is embedded within it, right? So consumers are still in control of their data. They're saying, yes, I, Scott, enable you to access my data to provide some service to me. So really important that, a big promise of agentic commerce is not just the kind of fluid and frictionless experiences that we give her, but it's also the personalized experiences. And to deliver a personalized experience, we need to be able to, in a secure and consented way, provide access to your history, your data, the things that we know about you, so that we can create the experience that you're looking to create. And then we extended our range of consulting services as well, and that was again deliberately in response to what we were hearing from our customers right across the world, who said, "Listen, this has moved far faster from kind of strategy into execution than we have realized, and we need some help." Technical help, strategic help, business help to kind of make sure that we can get our products and services out there as quickly as we need. To cast that one forward, Scott, we've seen partners like SAP Concur come on now using our Insights tokens, and that's really around the travel and expense management processes. And then the year wasn't done, Scott. I know this is an awful lot to digest in one go, and there's a reason why I have no hair, right? In October of that year, we focused a little bit more on the merchant side, right? So in October, we launched what we call AgentPay Merchant Acceptance Framework. So that was a standard designed to help merchants securely engage in agentic commerce at scale and with ease, right? We were very conscious that, while some merchants will have the technical resources to be able to kind of deeply integrate with these ecosystems as they emerge, the vast majority will not. So we really wanted to make it easy for them to step into this world, and also to ensure that they don't get left behind here. So there was a lot in that, Scott. It was a hell of a busy year for us. And if I'm honest, I don't see the pace dropping as we step into 26.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a busy year. So that's good. Let me go ahead and let's go. I know the definition of these things, but I think not all listeners, watchers may know these. Give me Ken, you're at a cocktail party and someone says, "Hey, I keep hearing about these tokens. Like, how do you explain what a token is to someone that's, let's say it's someone that's in the industry, but they're maybe working at a retailer doing more of a marketing function. How do you explain what a token is in this payments world?"
So a token is a way of replacing sensitive information with something that's cryptographically secured. So with a set of meaningless, ones, zeros, and squiggles that get exchanged by two parties, each of whom knows what that is, right? Because they interface with us, but anybody who intercepts the data in the middle has no way of knowing what that is. So it's a way of exchanging potentially sensitive information, Scott, between two parties where they can decrypt it, but no one else can. It's a lot of the technologies that we use when we're actually exchanging kind of card data between. So it's really, really secure data. And we feel it's really important as we step into this world, because if you go back to what kind of Mastercard's purpose is, you're right, we started off as a cards company, but I would say really we've evolved a little bit into being a technology company that facilitates the exchange of something that has value between parties who want to exchange it. Now, those parties have been merchants and governments and banks and business banks and issuers and acquirers and consumers over the last number of years, with agents now dropped in kind of on top of that. But if that's our role, if it's securely exchange something of value, then when we realized that, Scott, we made the pivot away from just being a cards company into a broader set of payment rails, but also realizing that other things have value nowadays too, like data, like loyalty points. And tokens and tokenization was a fantastic technology to enable all of those things to be exchanged between those participants safely, securely, with the consumer in control. And that's what tokenization is. So a kind of a digital foundation of, or say a foundational kind of technology to really enable us to step safely into both the digital and then into ultimately the agentic world.
Cool. One more, just to kind of make sure that everyone understands. So you also mentioned passkeys. So how are passkeys different than tokens?
So I think many of us will be familiar with Passkeys, but we won't necessarily have heard the name or use the name. So if you're going on to your wallet today, or if you are signing on to an application, and instead of having to key in a password, what you've done is it's using facial recognition or fingerprint recognition, and that's providing access into that wallet or into that service for you. That's essentially what a passkey is, right? So it's a biometric digital identity replacing a password to give a seamless but yet secure entry into a particular service that you're looking to avail of.
Got it. Okay. All right. So thanks for kind of picking up on this to make sure that everyone's tracking us here. So you had April, September, and October were kind of the big chunks of releases there, and you kind of had different themes there. So, one I want to dig into that I find interesting is the personalization. So, and I 100%, everything I'm going to ask is like the consumer always consents. As a consumer, I want to consent to these things because when you shop online, you're frequently, I'm a creature of habit, and the more the system I'm using, be it Amazon or ChatGPT or whatever it is I'm using, the more it can kind of see of my purchase history, the better experience I'm going to have. And how do you, so I get that I'm going to give permission to that. Maybe a good use case would be, well, you come up with these, you probably talk about this more than I do. So I can come up with a use case, but you'll come up with a better one. What's a really good use case for this? I get the concur one, but let's stay in the world of agentic commerce.
Yeah, I mean, let's take one that's even, because you've described, so personalization can be on the basis of data that a particular company holds about you, right? So your transaction history is obviously a very good indicator. There are transactions that you will do that will be monthly in nature or that will be tied to other events. So, if you've just renewed your travel insurance, you're probably planning a trip. If you've just bought a flight, you probably need a hotel, right? So there are predictive elements that you can see from your transaction history. And I think those are going to be really important to kind of help us actually kind of personalize the agentic experience. Beyond that, there are also things like your loyalty, your behavioral stuff, the brands that you have specific benefits with. So, without wanting to pick on one hotel versus another, if you were with Marriott or you're with Hilton, that's an important piece of information because you might have status with those brands and therefore you might get an improved experience by virtue of your status. So it's really important that you would want to provide that information into an agentic workflow because for us, I mean, again, if trust is the currency of innovation, the way we build trust, and particularly the move towards fully autonomous workflows, they won't start there. But if that's the direction over time, the way we do that is we got to come as close as possible to kind of replicating the thought process that a consumer would have. And if I was making if I bought a flight ticket to go to Paris, the first thing I would do is I would pick up my favorite brands and I would go, okay, well, what hotels do they have in Paris, right? And I would look for what can they do for me on specific dates. So it's really important that we provide that information in, because if they start recommending other hotels, by all means, I might look at them, but it's probably not where I would start, given that I have a clear preference and probably collect points and enjoy benefits from staying with particular hotels. So that's another example. But let's go further out again, Scott, if you want, right? I'm often struck by the kind of problem of merchant returns. Now, this is not one we're going to be able to solve today, but I do think this is solvable in the agentic in an agentic workflow. So today, I shop online. I will buy. I'm going to be kind to myself here: medium, large, and extra large. And all three will arrive, and I'll try on all three. The one that works best, I will send the other two back. Now, in my heart of hearts, I know that the cost of that return is probably baked into the price that the merchant actually gives me. But in the moment, it doesn't feel like it costs me anything, right? Because I've gotten probably a pre-addressed, pre-paid envelope to be able to return it to the merchant, or even if I can't, it's only going to cost me a couple of bucks to send it back. However, for the merchant, that's a much more significant problem. So what if in the future, it wasn't just the data that maybe your bank had on you or that particular merchant had on you? What if it was the data that was held elsewhere? So your size data, the size of your collar, the length of your sleeves, etc. And what if that could be provided in the same workflow in an e-commerce transaction to that merchant? So rather than send you 3 items knowing that you will probably return 2, what if they could send you the 1 item that's more than likely going to fit you perfectly? So that's kind of 2 examples from today, Scott, and one that I think we'll start to see emerge over the next, very small number of years.
I know that you guys have a lot of other things you're doing. And I think it would help us to kind of understand more of that, because it feels like, MasterCard's here with this suite of pieces, and we've got agentic commerce kind of coming, and it may help us see where you're going a little bit. So what are some of the things that MasterCard is doing in the broader context that you think eventually maybe there's some ways for agentic commerce to tie into?
Yeah, of course. So let me start a little bit by just, I know you know our business very well, Scott, but more for the average consumer out there, or average merchant out there, they may not be as familiar, or they may be familiar with part of our business rather than all of our business. And because most people are familiar with it from either, the decals on the card in their digital wallet, or the piece of plastic sitting in their physical wallet. But actually, whilst we're very proud of our origins and roots around card-based payments, it only represents a part of our business today. We have much broader payment rails, so account-to-account payments, blockchain-based, crypto and stablecoin-based payments. So a variety of payments, but actually we have businesses that really, whilst they might be adjacent to payments, are really separate from them. So we have businesses like open banking, where we're exchanging data, right, between, typically held in a bank with consumer consent, to an over-the-top service provider who then provides data on top of it. And that extends into open finance as well. We have businesses around security solutions. I think this is an area where you'll see us lean in a little bit more as agentic ecosystems arrive. So we have very substantive businesses in, identity protection, scam protection, threat protection, threat identification, scam identification. So I think that will be very, very important as this world, evolves, Scott. But those are substantive businesses for us today. We've businesses around data and insights. So we provide data and insights to merchants to kind of help them make smarter and more effective decisions. And then we have businesses around kind of loyalty and benefits and advertising as well. So there's a real diversity to the Mastercard business set, and then that's mirrored in the number of clients that we serve. Right, we serve everybody from the traditional kind of consumer-facing banks to the business banks, but also merchants of all categories. The very, very large digital players, that many of whom are really leading together with us and others this agentic shift. So those very large digital players, right through the very, very large global merchants and e-com providers, right through to the very small mom and pop shops, the small and medium-sized businesses, and even the micro businesses that you see dotted around the world. The MNOs, the mobile network operators that are out there. So there's a real diversity of clients, and that's kind of really what's reflected in our product set, Scott. So hopefully that orientates a little bit in Mastercard. Now, if you take that landscape then to answer your question, and you start to pull, well, what are the pieces of that, of that product set that actually could be relevant to the agentic world? Well, there's quite a lot, right? The personalization and insights businesses clearly have a role to play, and you've seen us start to lean in there with Insight Tokens. The consent frameworks that we have through open banking and the ability to safely and securely exchange data, we think that's really important with consumer consent. The digital technologies that we have, whether it's the Passkeys or the tokenization examples that we use there, the reach into all of these merchants globally, and then through our advisors and consulting organizations, just we've the best part of 4.5, maybe 5,000 people are all around the world out in our client offices, helping them build the products and services that are going to make them successful. So if you put all of that together, Scott, I think that's kind of probably a good summary of the capabilities that we have to kind of work with our clients and partners to kind of help this world arrive. And I bring it back again to, our role in this. We really see ourselves as a technology company in commerce. We think we're incredibly well positioned at the nexus of this vast network, and we're leaning into the future. We're not passive here. We're actively engaged and working with partners to really drive and deliver on this, and we feel really good about it.
You spent a lot of time marinating on this. One question I wanted to ask, and this is kind of in the weeds, so we've been high level, now we'll jump in the weeds. So I'm not a super payments person, but it's interesting. It seems like we're at a world here in early 26 where we've got kind of two competing frameworks. You've got ACP over on one side, which is the ChatGPT side, and then Google has their competing AP2. How do you guys look at these different standards, and do you think there's going to be a winner? Or are we still in this Cambrian explosion of different things that we're trying, and then we'll settle down. So I guess one of them is more of a Ken theoretical question than one's more like, what's Mastercard doing about this?
That's a fair question, and I completely get it. I think the answer is more the second, Scott. So standards are the backbone of agentic commerce, right? Because for merchants out there, many of them are not going to be able to implement 5 and 10 and 15 standards, at least not day one, right? We might see very deep integrations to many standards emerge over time, but I don't see that at the start. I think it's understandable that people will compete to launch new standards out there. But for us in Mastercard, we're going to support standards both like AP2 and ACP because they enable interoperability, security, and scale, not just for payments, but also for intent, for discovery, and for agent-to-agent interactions. And it's really important that people understand that when you think about agentic commerce, you're not just thinking about agentic payments, you're thinking about the kind of discovery piece, you're thinking about the kind of fulfillment piece, and ultimately you're thinking about the kind of payment piece. So our goal in Mastercard is to remain agnostic and accessible. So you will see us work with all standards as they emerge. And I think most people will take a similar approach. And the reason for that is so that innovation can flourish. It's far too early in this journey for people to lock into one thing or another. So you're going to see us really look to support all of them. I think you mentioned a few there, right? The agentic commerce. You mentioned languages for agents to communicate. You mentioned languages for agents to share context, and you mentioned languages for agents to verify intent. So that's kind of AP2 and ACP. You've also got model context protocol. You've got agent-to-agent payments. There's a whole bunch. There's maybe somewhere between 6 and 8 standards globally that are really emerging across that full agentic experience, and we're going to look to support them all. And not just support them, we're actually going to actively work with partners to kind of shape those standards. And ultimately what I think might happen, Scott, but this is crystal balling a little bit, is I think we will certainly see interoperability, if not convergence, across some of those standards over time.
Yeah, seems like some clever startup will just create a way for them all to talk to each other.
It's if you draw the parallel with what happened with blockchains, right, and with cryptocurrency, you saw a huge number of different standards out there initially, and then you saw secondary layers start to emerge that provided access to the multiple chains underneath it.
Cross-chain stuff.
Exactly. At a minimum, you will see the equivalent of those level 2 chains happening in the agentic world. But that's only one solve here. I actually just think the standards themselves might converge over time. But if they don't, I think we'll see the equivalent of those level 2 chains.
Yeah, we've got about 5 minutes left, and you brought up your crystal ball, so it seems like you've got one sitting there. So we'll gaze into it further. And first, I thought you were brave to say 2040 earlier on. So most times I think we all are kind of struggling to see to 2030, but to whatever extent you're seeing forward, what do you think is going to happen with this agentic commerce? One of my frameworks is that I kind of liken it to autonomous vehicles, where the aspiration is to get to full autonomy, but we're not even close yet. I put us at level 3. You've probably seen my diagram for that. And I think we're probably 2 to 3 years away from full autonomy, because the technology is probably pretty close, but it's really the consumer that kind of has to come along for the drive. And you've certainly been on this journey through e-commerce too, through your career. And I remember we didn't have payments on eBay in the early days. Like, people are like, well, I'll just send a check because I trust that. Now, obviously that seems arcane, but that wasn't that long ago. So these things happen pretty quick, and we're already way down the consumers are pretty far down the path. But what are your predictions of kind of where you think things are going?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me give you an analogy, and I'm going to cast the analogy forward a little bit, Scott, to maybe try and answer it, because to some degree it's a bit uncertain, and it's uncertain because of consumer adoption on the one hand, which will be predicated on trust and hyper-personalization and a bunch of other different things, regulation, and other things. But let's go back a little bit first. So when I was young, I remember every single year my parents brought us camping to France, and we almost always went to exactly the same campsite. But every single year, my parents went to the travel agent in the local town in which I grew up. They sat down in front of a physical travel agent and they had a conversation. And they talked about dates and they talked about budget and they talked about time. And the travel agent built an itinerary for them. Why did they do that, right? Partially it was because a travel agent took away hassle, took away effort. But it was also because a travel agent probably had access to deals that my parents were not going to be able to get access to by just making phone calls themselves. And that's a little bit of where we are now, right? We're at this assisted kind of agentic assistance kind of moment where we're going to use some of these assistants quite quickly over the next number of years. I think these will get scale where they'll do a lot of the initial work for us. They'll help us find the itinerary. They'll suggest the hotels. They'll need to do that with a really deep knowledge of us, because if they don't have that, I think there is a risk that they will have limited utility outside of businesses. But on the consumer side, they could have limited utility if they can't be personalized to us, back to that conversation around the hotel chains that you prefer. But on the assumption that we tackle those problems, which I believe we will, then I think we'll get to assisted quite quickly. The jump from assisted to fully autonomous, that's a more interesting one, right? Because I'm fully convinced that my parents absolutely enjoyed that conversation with the travel agent every single year. They liked to sit down. They liked to have a discussion and a debate. I don't think they really wanted to just phone up the travel agent and ever say to them, here's what I'm looking for. Here's my budget. You just come back, book everything, and just tell me when it's done. I don't want to be consulted while you do it. I don't think my parents wanted that. So I can see a future where actually things move at different speeds. Mundane tasks, getting your next pair of runners that look exactly like your last pair of runners, refilling your fridge when things have gone out of date, or as your, if you prepay your mobile phone bill or your minutes or your utilities, order those in advance because you're running low. I can see those things happening quite quickly. But for things that we enjoy, Scott, we typically choose to be part of those flows. And I think that one is a little bit less clear for us. I think they will become assisted quite quickly. But I then come back to my parents choosing to be part of that travel flow. I think they could stay at assisted for some time. Mm-hmm. And I think that could take a number of years, not because the technology wouldn't allow us to complete it, but it's because people are choosing to remain part of that flow because they enjoy it. So I think we will see the technology in agentic commerce giving utility to people and enabling them to make choices with mundane tasks, moving to fully autonomous relatively quickly, being a small number of years. Whereas other tasks, maybe more complicated tasks, are tasks that we just genuinely enjoy being a part of. I think that could take quite a bit longer. And then on the business side, I ironically think it might happen a little bit faster, Scott, because businesses are always in pursuit of a competitive edge. They want to be able to deliver value to their customers, their buyers, their providers faster. They want to be able to operate more efficiency with less cost. So I think it could happen a little bit faster on some of the business flows. And that's not really what you're hearing as a narrative out there in the industry at the moment, Scott. But that's a little bit of, certainly something that I'm going to be exploring as a signal over the next number of months through 26. Really, are we seeing adoption on the business side a little bit faster than the consumer side, with the consumer side racing to semi-autonomous, but then kind of hitting pause for a bit, whilst the business side probably slower to get to semi-autonomous, but then actually might take the step to fully autonomous a little bit faster than the consumer side. So for my crystal ball moment, Scott, there it is.
There, and when you say business, you're more like B2B transactions.
Correct.
Like,
B2B transactions.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. So that is great. So you've given us a great framework for what MasterCard's doing, what your role is, and a little bit of what you think the future is going to do. I appreciate the time, Ken. I'm still envious of your role there and your ability to see all this data, and doing anything innovative is hard, and then to kind of have the access to the assets you do is an amazing benefit that you guys have. So I think it's a great way to do it.
Well, fantastic. Scott, thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed speaking with you. Thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to connecting again over the course of 26, and we'll find out whether we're right or not.
Yeah, we'll have to have you back, and we'll kind of score ourselves harshly on the predictions.
Perfect. Scott, Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Ken.
Follow, rate, and share to stay up to date with Retailgentic, your guide to the future of AI shopping agents.